Welcome back to One Winning Pod. The Ravens made their selections, made no trades on the draft, which was a little surprising, but they got their guys. I think the board fell to them just the way they were hoping, and I definitely felt encouraged after the draft. How'd you guys feel?
I liked it. I mean, the way I looked at this draft, it felt to me kind of like a, kind of meat and potatoes draft. I'm going to say this might sound like a negative, but I don't think it is when I kind of explain what I'm saying here. I don't think it was a very exciting draft for the Ravens. I think you look at years past, and a lot of these guys are very good players, and I think they're going to be very technically sound and fit the Ravens really well. I don't know how highlight worthy they're going to be, though. I mean, a lot of the stuff I think that they do well isn't the flashiest, but a lot of guys who fit needs on this team. I think that's certainly clear in the day 1 and 2 picks. Day 3, which I'm sure we'll get in, is a little more of a discussion. But look, I think that the Ravens, they obviously have a Super Bowl window. You got to fill holes fast in this case, and I think they got guys who will be ready to contribute in day 1 and should be able to fill holes left by veteran guys who went to other teams, which that's exactly the assignment for where this team is right now in regards to competing for a Super Bowl.
Yeah, I mean, I definitely love the first, I'd say probably the first 2 picks, I think are guys that both super talented and also fill position of need. After that, I think, I think it depends. I think there's some picks that I do like, other ones that I'm like, well, maybe they may not be able to contribute right away. But I can kind of see how they fill in the roster, for not just this year, but in the next couple of years. Going to the day 3 stuff, I mean, it's so hard, I think, to, predict how some of those picks are going to pan out. But, I think it's interesting, especially taking a quarterback late. Obviously, it's, Lamar insurance. That's pretty much it. But I do think it's kind of interesting, to be able to do that. And, he's a, very different type of quarterback from what Lamar is going to have. So I think, as far as position groups go, I think that there's some that still have questions. Quarterback, I feel like, is one of them. I think there are a couple other position groups that still have a few questions, which, I'm sure DeCosta is going to be able to fill out through, the rest of the offseason into training camp.
I was a little disappointed that I never came to the conclusion that drafting cornerback first was the move. And I guess maybe it was partially because I was thinking a top 7 tackle might make it, and then it was kind of like a buy now button situation. But I don't know. I also thought it was realistic that wouldn't happen, and I never really considered corner was the best move there. But then watching how the rest of the board played out, it made a lot of sense because a whole bunch of corners went off the board shortly thereafter, and not many tackles. Only 2 tackles went between then. And frankly, a lot of people, wanted one of the guys that were available at our next pick at 30 when they were thinking oh, we got to go tackle. So I was like, this is perfect. It really worked out well. So what I thought was really interesting, and I'm curious what you guys thought, if, I always appreciate the play-by-play of the draft, who's trading up, who's trying to do what. When the Chiefs traded up to 28, I was a little concerned that they might take Guyton. Now he went 29 to the Cowboys, but instead they took Worthy, and I felt like we were okay, perfect. Nate Wiggins fell to us. There was a lot of smoke that Nate Wiggins might be the pick, according to I think Jeremiah updated his mock. His last mock had Wiggins there, so I think people caught wind that we really coveted him, and it sounded like once he was available and they knew they could get him, it was a no-brainer, and they just made the selection. So to match Worthy, he has a 4.28 speed in the 40, a 1.5 split at the 10-yard line. He's not even 21 yet. Some consider him the top man corner, and you can see the playmaking skills. You can see the speed on the tape, and he definitely feels like a guy who they're going to have to find a way to use. It's not super duper clear how he fits in right away, but next year, it's really clear how he fits in.
Yeah, I mean, here's the thing. We know that injuries happen. Injuries happen every year in the secondary. It seems like for the Ravens, with the exception of 2019, there's been a major injury, right? Somewhere, whether it be at safety with Marcus Williams, at corner with Marlon Humphrey, or something else. So you got to have those guys there who are able to be there and be injury replacement. I mean, and we talked about, obviously, last year in free agency, they hit the jackpot with Ronald Darby and Arthur Millette, but there's been several years where they had to do that same thing, and those vet guys just didn't come through. I mean, so you can't expect that that's going to happen every year. So they obviously drafted Wiggins. They drafted another corner, which we'll talk about later. Both different types of corners. I think that they did a good job there, getting two different styles in there. But it's so funny, as you were saying that, I hadn't put that together in my head. But I mean, obviously, regardless of who else comes out of the AFC, this season and next season, we know that the Chiefs basically proved last year that they are the new New England Patriots. They're going to be in the contention for the AFC Championship every single year. They had a team that had lots of flaws compared to years past, and they were able to win the Super Bowl on a different style of football than they had been playing the previous couple of seasons. So you're going to need to be able to match up against them, obviously. So, they get this speedster and Worthy, like you said. Okay, well, who's the opposite to that? Wiggins right there. So, I think in a future matchup with the Chiefs, obviously there is that in the regular season, probably going to be in the postseason too. Now you got a guy who can run as fast as that guy. We'll see what Xavier Worthy is at the next level. I liked his tape. I think he's more than just a speedster. I liked him before, he broke out at the combine with that 40 time. But obviously the Chiefs have drafted this speed wide receiver before and not seen it, really pan out at the next level. So we'll see. But I certainly think that given some of the teams that have this speed at wide receiver, some of them in your own division as well, you're going to see Wiggins out there to go up against these guys at certain times to try and, counter what these teams are going to do. So, I mean, I agree with you. Is it 100% clear how he's going to fit in down to down? Maybe not, but there's going to be use for a guy like that who's going to be able to run with practically any wide receiver who is going to line up in the NFL.
Yeah, just kind of second all that stuff, man. I think is definitely a great pick. I think, one, it hits a position of need. We know with not starting Darby again, we had a need for a corner on the outside. Millette obviously plays the slot, so we kind of got that position there. And, I think, Wiggins, I'm not sure if he's going to be a guy who's going to start right away. Like you said, Alec, I mean, he's a pretty young player. I think he would probably take some time to be coached up. I mean, kind of looking around, even like the division, I feel like some of the rookie corners that like Cincinnati took or, Cleveland took, or even, I mean, Pittsburgh with Joey Porter Jr. It took them probably until like mid-season before they got significant snaps. Some of them a little bit longer. So I feel like that would be my target for him. Basically be, rotated in a little bit early season as we kind of get the defense going, and he gets enough practices under his belt. I would kind of want to see him play more significant snaps like October or November. And then hopefully, be a guy that'll be in the mix on the outside, right? I mean, we're going to have Brandon Stevens. As far as I know, I think he's going to stay on the outside. I know, Alec, you have some other opinions on that. Marlowe, I think, can play outside, but honestly, I think Wiggins could be a guy, like, if he can get on the field, I think that could push Marlowe inside for some snaps as well. But either way, like, I think it's a great pick. I really, really like it. I think given, where all the players were that were available at that time, like, I think, it just seems like another, best player available move by the Ravens.
Yeah, I mean, I honestly, I was just thinking out loud when night one was over, like maybe Stevens moves into some sort of safety role. But I don't think that's going to be the case after some of the other draft picks they made. So I guess we'll see how it plays out. I'm just really curious, like their base look last year was, with Hamilton in the slot, and there might be ways to make that happen again this year, but it's not as clear if that gets the best. It probably almost definitely doesn't get your best 5 players on the field anymore. So that's kind of the issue. So we'll see how they figure it all out. and we'll go forward from there. But I tell you guys, I pumped the air so hard when we got the second guy. He was a late riser for me. I watched him when I helped Jason go through his board movers, and he had big confidence in Roger Rosengarten, moving them up much higher on his board. He was like, screw consensus. I really believe in this guy. And I watched him, and it made a ton of sense to me because I think he got mislabeled, similar to maybe how Penix could get mislabeled because he was a lefty and people aren't used to seeing the ball get thrown that way, that, he's a right tackle. Like, yeah, he played right tackle, but he's a left tackle. He has the feet of left tackle. In fact, they moved him when Penix became the quarterback. And his feet are great. He reminds me a lot of Ronnie Stanley with like just shorter arms. Very similar build otherwise. The anchor is his biggest concern. You're going to be like, okay, can you gain any more weight to anchor a little bit better, get some more strength? He's a pretty lean athlete. But the way he moves into level 2 is super exciting. And I think what you see with these draft picks, and you look at the rest of the line, how it might be shaping up, it looks like we're trying to become more athletic. Right, we're kind of like slowly moving away from the Greg Roman line that we had into a line that better fits the new scheme. So I'm excited to see him play. I think he's going to win the starting job, and I could see him moving to left tackle after Ronnie Stanley goes. I thought he was a great pick. And another thing I'll say, though, is right after we picked him, Suma Mataia went to the Chiefs, and this draft has 3 picks to the Chiefs where I was like, I could have seen the Ravens picking that guy. And now it's like, all right, let's see how this plays out. Because again, like you said, Peter, we will see you again in the regular season. We'll probably see you again in the postseason if things go the way we wanted to go. Unless you get knocked out early, which frankly at this point, I'm okay with. I know we don't like to play that game of like, oh, we want to see the other team. Sometimes I just want to see the other team. I'm tired of that red team.
Unfortunately, I'm wearing a red shirt here. I didn't plan for this well.
It's all good.
But Star Wars shirt, not Chiefs, just to make sure we're cool here. But a really intriguing pick. You do look at the frame, absolutely. I don't know how to answer that question. Have said several times before on the show. I mean, we didn't mention it, but Wiggins, has some frame concerns as well. A lot of talk of his build being more of a track build. Thoughts of can he carry more weight as well in the season. I think you've seen lean quarterbacks even on the Ravens, have success before. I mean, Dwayne Starks was pretty lean guy. Samarai Roll had a track build. So, I mean, that doesn't, concern me too much for Wiggins. Tackle's a little interesting. I know we're just 2 years removed from drafting Linderbaum, and there was the same concerns there. He's slight for a center, a little lighter for a center. He's going to, the detractors said he's going to get pushed around in the north. And obviously Linderbaum has held up great at the NFL level. Are there certainly some snaps where it looks like he's has to try a little harder than some other guys would if he really gets bull rushed by a bigger guy? Yeah, absolutely. But he has developed a really good plan. He's able to fight those guys off. So yeah, I mean, I do wonder if tackle's a little harder in that regard, particularly for someone who doesn't have as long of arms. But also at the same time, again, if he knows how to use his body, if he understands what his athleticism is, what his attributes are, and knows how to make that work, that's all I care about personally, in my opinion. And I agree. You see it on the tape. The athleticism is there. DeCosta said during the draft he's looking to build a track team. Usually we're thinking about that with the wide receivers in the corners, but between Linderbaum and this pick, it's starting to seem like it's going to all the positions. But I think and that's a really good point you bring up there. Yes, he played right tackle in college, but right tackle was left tackle in that offense with a left-handed quarterback. He has big game experience. I mean, Washington made the college football championship game last year against Michigan. They obviously lost that game, but so he got that experience at the college level, playing in the biggest game of that level of football. There's a lot of things you like about this guy. And, I think that it seems like they're going to be looking at him to be the starter. I mean, maybe Falele beats him out, but it feels like Falele will have to have a really good camp, or the opposite, that Rosengarten will have some, big ramp up that he'll need to acclimate to the NFL for him to not get the job. So we'll see. We'll see how that plays out in preseason. But he certainly seems like a guy who can step in week one and just run with the job.
Yeah, I don't know if I will go that far to say whether he's going to be a starter yet. I do think we got a lot of time, though. It wouldn't surprise me if he did, but I think right now, I feel like Falele haven't played, about half the snaps. I don't remember exact snap count from last year, but he split snaps with Morgan Moses, right? So, I mean, I know he's not technically the starter, but he has a good bit of experience, and at least the coaching staff, seemed to trust him in those situations, and he seemed to do a good job. So, I think right now he's definitely the front runner for me, at least on the right tackle side. Stanley is a little bit of a wild card, right? I mean, we've kind of seen from his performance has been very up and down, very dependent on his health. And so, maybe there's a world in which maybe pushing Stanley a little bit, but you'd have to think, with Stanley's contract and his experience and how long he's been here, like if he's healthy, he's going to go. If he, were somehow to get beaten out by Rosengarten, I think that would be a huge problem. But, I think ultimately, I kind of agree with what you said earlier, Alec. I think, this is definitely a move where he can compete right now. He can push the guys we have right now. I think for right tackle, he could probably win the job if he's good enough. But honestly, this seems like a move for after, Ronnie's contract ends. There were just so many question marks with him and his availability and health and everything. Seems like Rosengarten's got to be the guy who's going to have the lead to be able to take left tackle for years to come.
I do wonder what their plan would be. They don't like making 2-for-1 swaps, but like part of me is like, if Stanley has his inevitable tweak and he's out for a couple games, would Rosengarten flip sides? Would they bring Falele in to right tackle if he had already won the starting job at right? Would they bring in McCary? Kind of curious to see how that would play out. But hopefully it doesn't happen. Hopefully, I hope Stanley gets all his incentives. That'd be a really good year for Stanley and really good for the Ravens. So, as we found out, I think the last time we recorded, his incentives are quite rich. It's not just playing time; it's also getting a Pro Bowl or All Pro. So, he's got a lot of work to do if he wants to get all that cash, and I hope he feels motivated to do so and has a great year. And honestly, great career. I hope that he bounces back and he becomes back to form and has a good rest of his career for a couple more years. Who knows, But it does seem like we have addressed the future a bit. And I was really glad it worked out because this tackle class was extremely unique. I don't see it happening again in the next couple of years. And the fact that you can get a guy like Rosengarten in the last 2 picks of the second round is pretty unheard of, honestly. So definitely excited that worked out. Once that happened, I felt like anything could happen in the rest of the draft and I'd be happy. I truly felt like, okay, we got our tackle. Exhale.
Yeah, I mean, look, I think that what's great about this pick is like you're saying, if he's not ready to be the starter, he's a guy who provides more depth, right? I mean, Falele is a question mark as to how effective he can be. Cleveland's a question mark as to how far he can be. You need guys there who can be contingency plans if something doesn't work out due to injury or poor play, and that seems like what he's going to provide. I think there's been some. There were some scouting reports that said he might be able to play the interior line as well.
I don't know. I mean, I wouldn't. I would say that would be wasting him, and honestly, probably not. At least, like the kind of players the Ravens like using at guard, it wouldn't be him.
Yeah, I mean, I can get that, but it just kind of depends on what the team needs, I guess. I'm pretty sure even in his rookie year, Jonathan Ogden played a couple games at left guard. I'm looking that up.
Yeah, he definitely did. I mean, yeah, it could be done. I doubt it. I feel it, but who knows? We'll see how he plays out. I think if before that would happen, I think McCary would play. That's my hunch. I think McCary would play a guard. But maybe he shouldn't, though. Maybe he should be reserved as the backup center. I don't know. We'll see how that plays out. I'm definitely extremely excited for training camp battle and to see this guy, actually get some reps.
I guess we'll move on to the next guy we picked at third round, Adisa Issac, another edge from Penn State, following the footsteps of Odafe Owe. So I feel like kind of a very similar player. I think to Owe, definitely high motor. A guy who can really get after the quarterback. I don't have his stats in front of me, but I can definitely tell you that he did not. He had more than 0 sacks in college, believe it or not, over Owe. But yeah, I mean this pick is super interesting. I think it's going to be. I feel like the most interesting thing for the Ravens is that they want to address the edge position primarily through their draft. I mean, this is 3 drafts in a row, I guess, that we've really picked a young edge player, Owe, Ojabo, and now Issac. So, I think all of it is kind of untapped potential at this point, right? We know Owe kind of took a little bit of a step up this year, but still kind of like didn't have the the production of as a Clowney or a Van Noy this year, but definitely did look improved. Ojabo, we saw a little bit. He looked explosive, but then obviously got hurt. Going into this year, Issac, to me, is not a guy that will immediately take over the position. I think that he can have a chance to contribute. But like I said kind of earlier at the top, I think it's a relatively good pick. I think it fits a position of need, but there's still lots of question marks for the position group overall.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with what you're saying. I don't think he's going to be a year one contributor unless he follows the Tavius Robinson route. I mean, I feel like we said the exact same things about Robinson when we drafted him last year. There were some things that popped on tape that looked like, hey, look, this could translate really well to the NFL, but, looked a little raw. I don't think Issac looks as raw as much as, I just think that his game needs to expand. There's some things he can improve in run defense, I know, but and at least in the tape I watched, I didn't see a ton of pass rush moves in there when he was going up against the quarterback. A lot of like what we saw with Owe, just kind of, being able to be more athletic than the tackles at that level and just kind of running by them. But, like Robinson, we'll see what happens. I mean, Robinson obviously exceeded expectations when he was in there his rookie year. I mean, Owe had some splash plays his rookie year in the beginning of it. Then the NFL teams adjusted and forced him to develop some pass rush moves and some other ways of impacting the game. So what I really like what the Ravens are doing here is, they're continuing year in and year out to draft edge guys who have some intriguing tools that maybe they're not going to work out right away, but you give them a couple years to develop, you hone in on what they do well, you figure out how to expand their game, and they can contribute. And that's really what this team needs to do. I mean, a couple of seasons ago, this edge rusher room was looking really bleak, and now they're continuing to add to it year in and year out. And, I don't know if it's exactly where they want it to be still, but it's continuing to get to improve year in and year out. Getting back Kyle Van Noy was a huge help. I think this drafting Issac helps. Hopefully you've got a healthy Ojabo and he's able to improve from the little bit of, middle of the road performance that he had when he was healthy last season. So they're continuing to build this room where you have more shots that something's going to hit. And there certainly seems like there's a plan. And I think that's the most important thing with this pick, just adding another young guy with intriguing attributes. Hopefully it works out. I don't think it's clear whether it will or not at this point, but certainly adding to that room and, just having a plan to continue to add guys and add what they can do on that defense.
Yeah, he's not the same kind of animal as Owe as far as, twitchiness or ridiculous speed, but he's still very athletic, has good twitch, great bend, and the high motor, like you mentioned, Peter, is good. I think Chris said it, but anyways, yeah, like high motor, it's there, and I think that will help translate eventually to the run game, which is a little bit of his weaker part of his game right now. I think the nice thing that happened here is it gives a little bit more competition, obviously, for Davius Robinson, Dafe Owe, and Ojabo. They can't take for granted that they'll, get their snaps next to what's the guy's name? The veteran that we brought back? Kyle Van Noy. Yeah. So Kyle Van Noy's back too. It's a very crowded room, very talented room. So that's good. It'll kind of push everybody to improve. And I think, though, they're going to call back to the Liars Luncheon. Part of me thinks the Ravens have a Bishotti reign of terror going on with edge rushers. Let's find a guy late day 2, early day 3 that has traits that in 2 to 3 years will be pretty darn good, And if you keep doing that every year there'll be a new one that's pretty darn good, and we can have a nice pipeline, and you never have to pay them. Or you don't have to worry about paying them, because that's always what they're trying to do too, is try to find that value of these really expensive positions. So a great pick, a guy that would have been higher on some boards, I think, or higher in Ravens fans' minds if they thought we were focused on finding an edge, but because of how crowded that room already was, it didn't seem like maybe as high of a need. It might be a bit later, but I think the Ravens proved that they're always going to draft an edge. They're not afraid to do it. That's definitely when they're its best player available and a high value position, they're going to do it every time. So it seems like we'll just keep ending up getting guys like that. How does it keep happening? I feel like that's the classic joke about the Ravens in the draft is how they keep ending up with all these good players. It's well, they take them, Everyone else had to pass to do that, but yeah. So we'll see how that plays out. I think it wasn't my favorite pick. I was a little disappointed. I really wanted Jaden Hicks. I was give me that safety. Let's really finish this, And yeah. Jaden Hicks went to the Chiefs, so we'll get there. It's another pairing that I want to keep pay attention to. So, started off day 3. We had that 113 pick we got from Morgan Moses, and everyone assumed, all right, they didn't go wide receiver at the 3rd round. Surely this will be the wide receiver pick, and it was. Devontez Walker kind of fell right into their lap. The guy that a lot of people liked, a lot of people didn't like. He's got a polarizing player, and I can see why. When I evaluated him, he obviously has the physical traits. I would say if you want to comp him to somebody on the team currently, it'd be Nelly. Kind of a long strider, huge catch radius. I think from a scheme fit perspective, he's nice because he seems to be able to adjust and get thrown open and use his big frame to do so. But kind of a lazy player, I feel not in a bad work ethic way, but in a I've always been athletic and be able to win that way. So I think he has a lot of refining to do in the details of his game to be better as a route runner and to become a more professional wide receiver. I think he's entering an environment where that can happen. We have a lot of good route runners on this team. We have good coaching for this now. I hope that he is able to develop. I am also really hope that he gets a lot more disciplined when looking for yards after the catch opportunities. There's a couple times I saw on film that he tries to do too much. Instead of taking the yards that are right there, take the 5 yards of yak instead of getting none. Things like that. Get the first down, things of that nature. I think he was trying to be a little too much. But one thing I noticed too, he was catching balls from Drake May. So I like to see the potential he showed when the ball's right on the money. May threw a lot of pretty passes, threw him open, things of that nature. And I was cool, you got Lamar Jackson. You'll get very similar quality of passes. And I could see how he could fit in the offense. I think he's a high ceiling play, very low floor. And frankly, all I think we need. I think there's so few snaps for pass catchers sometimes in this offense, and just the amount we kind of distribute the ball around, that I would rather get a guy that has a high ceiling. And if he fails out, you can get the next Nelson Aguilar to get more more snaps and more targets. So I like taking big swings, particularly in the 4th round.
Yeah, I think as far as 4th round receivers in this draft, I think that this is a really intriguing pick, like you're saying. I think that what I really like about him is that we saw in the game against the Chiefs in the AFC Championship game, the Chiefs had taken everything away in that second half, and there were multiple times where Lamar was trying to hit Bateman or trying to hit Aguilar on a 9 route down the seam, and just the separation wasn't happening. The timing wasn't happening. Now, I think part of that is that throw just really wasn't there all year. I don't know if that was on the right receivers. I don't know if that was on Lamar, but I think that's a play that that Walker will be able to make. Will be able to make it on immediately in the NFL to help this year. I don't know, but that is certainly something that this wide receiver room is missing right now. And I think that skill set that he brings, if he's able to do it right out of the gate, there's a role for him in this offense right away. With that said, though, I think you look at his production at UNC, you would like to see a little more. That's not the end all be all, but certainly it lends to me that I don't think this guy's ever going to be, a guy who's going to be a top target in this offense. But certainly I think a role player, kind of like what Aguilar's been to him so far. I think he's a guy that's going to fit in certain packages. In some ways, he reminds me of a guy that I can't believe I can't remember his name right now, because I always loved watching him play in the preseason. He got like 2 catches in 2019 before he went to the Jets. Is his name like Tyrell Scott or something? I shouldn't even throw it out there if I don't know. But
he went to the Jets? I don't know.
Yeah. Receiver that in 2019 that ended up going to the Jets?
Man, I should not have brought out a name that I can't remember. We're going way back here. But yeah, I mean, I think that there's definitely a high ceiling. It's just hard for me to get too excited just because, well, the Ravens did hit on Zay Flowers last year, obviously. Those guys, Jaleel Scott. Yeah, that was his name, Jaleel Scott. Yeah, reminds me a little bit of Jaleel Scott.
That's right. I mean, that's right.
Yeah. It's just hitting on one guy, particularly a first-round guy who some scouts said was the best wide receiver in the draft, doesn't convince me enough that the Ravens have finally figured out how to draft wide receiver, right? So, yeah, certainly a lot of things to be excited about, but kind of a wait and see for me to see what this guy's going to be able to do long-term with the Ravens.
I totally forgot about Jaleel Scott. I was looking up his name. I was thinking of you remember Quincy Adebojo?
Yeah.
Apparently he went to the Jets in 2019, but he wasn't with the Ravens in 2019.
Okay. Yeah. I think Scott went to them in 2020 with the Jets in 2020.
Okay. All right. So I was off a little bit.
But one catch for 16 yards with the Jets and then out of the NFL. I liked him, and I wish he could have gone somewhere and been something.
Yeah. Anyway, the only other thing I have to say about Tez Walker, EDC definitely sees him as a vertical threat. I think he mentioned, kind of like a Torrey Smith in his press conference when he talked about all the picks. I could definitely see that. Just looking at the draft, though, I mean, I feel like that was probably the last guy of that receiver type to be taken in like the next 60 picks. It looks like the next pick that would be somebody who was similar would be Bub Means, and he was taken in the 5th round at pick 170, I think, by the Saints. Similar body type, 6'2", 215. A guy who plays vertical routes very well, large catch radius and everything. But all the other receivers that were taken at the end of the 4th round or into the 5th, more slot guys. So we have Zay Flowers. I don't really think we need another one. So, from that perspective, I think it makes sense. We'll have to see. Bub Means could be really good. I will admit I've not watched film on him, so we'll just have to see. But I think it's a good move. Like I don't mind it from depth. I mean, receivers another group where obviously last year we're really a little disappointed, I think, but there's also like a lot of untapped potential. The news we didn't really talk about, but Bateman got that extension. So we know that he'll be here for at least the next couple of years. I think that'll be really great. Zay is obviously here. Beyond that, there's a lot of spots behind. So I think it makes a lot of sense from that perspective.
Sure does. So This is the pick that I was a little sad about because, man, we got down to 130, our original 4th round pick, and my boy Jane Hicks is still on the board. I was like, how lucky, how blessed. Surely that's who they're going to pick. And then they go pick a corner, Tampa Jr. Tampa, which I didn't realize he's double Tampa. TJ Tampa out of Iowa State. They said we would have considered him on day 2. Maybe where Adisa was picked, but they had already picked a corner, so kind of pushed him a little bit down their board. But then he was too good of a value. Couldn't pass up. 6'1", 189, 22 years old. He has the build to be a good press corner. He excels currently in zone. He get a little handsy when he plays physical and press coverage, but he's also a very physical player in general, which is great. Good in the run game. He's a converted corner, so he played actually wide receiver when he got recruited to college. And I think the good news is we got a lot younger in the room by getting him and Wiggins. Yeah, you're saying Higgins yesterday really screwed with me. I nearly said Higgins. I was like, that's not right. It's Wiggins, right? I'm not making this up. Anyways, but yeah, it makes the room a little younger. I don't love his 40 time, and I know I'm usually not one to worry about the underwear Olympics, but when it comes to corner play, I do. Corners, I really do worry sometimes about just the raw, speed, change of direction. These things really, really matter. You can't teach it, and it's one of those things that at safety I can look the other way, but at corner I get a little concerned, which makes me wonder: can he now be a corner? Or rather, can he be a safety? Could he play, some cover 2 looks and things of that nature? I think the answer is yes. I think he definitely could. He's really good in zone. He's really good at attacking the catch point. Good ball skills. So I'm curious to see how they deploy him. Hicks got selected a couple picks later by the Chiefs, and I guess we'll see how this plays out. It's a crowded room. I would wonder, with them doing this, it makes me wonder if Stevens is going to get re-signed or they're going to let him go elsewhere and hope to, get a comp pick out of it. It sounds to me like that will most likely be the option. But unless he does well, Tampa does well, I think they might actually want to re-sign Stevens because Marlowe's getting older and they might not want to keep him around because there might be a cliff. Don't want to pay him, things of that nature. So this is a good inflection point. It's good to get the team younger, and obviously JD and Pepe are on notice.
Yeah, I mean, I there are definitely some things that I think are really intriguing about this guy. I mean, the hard hittingness is there. I think that underneath, I saw a lot in his highlights that was really sticky with wide receivers, able to jump in front. He had a decent amount of pass defenses in his college career. Kind of reminded me a bit of Corey Ivy. He used to play for the Ravens a little bit back in, was that around 06 to 08. At the same time, though, it does also kind of feel like Pepe 2.0, right? Like you're saying, zone corner, plays really well, closer to the line of scrimmage. Of course, he's a completely different player, right? They're two different people. But I think that it's interesting. I do agree that I think that safety was more the position of need there. And it doesn't give me the warm and fuzzies that the Chiefs selected your guy.
Spags is going to have so much fun with them. It kills me. It kills me.
I mean, we've seen this before. I feel like on years past, we've highlighted guys, and then the Steelers or the Patriots took them, and now the Chiefs are in the market of, also being super draft savvy. So it's kind of confirmation that, there was something there that, we should have been interested in. But we'll see. I think that is an interesting idea, though, that, maybe they could try him at safety. And in that case, would you rather have him or Hicks? I don't know. I haven't thought too deeply enough of that, but yeah, I certainly think that there are intriguing attributes about him, though. I agree with you that maybe there's some questions with man, but certainly some good things on tape with him that, if coached up right, he could be a pretty big contributor to this defense as his career progresses.
Yeah, I definitely love the double dip. I think corner is definitely a position group that I felt like we needed some more players. Kind of like looking at the guys behind we have right now. Like, look, Alec, I think you said it. Armour Davis and Pepe Williams right now, like, they just really haven't shown us anything. They've been injured. In Pepe's case, he was injured a lot. Armour Davis has been injured a little bit, but then also just really hasn't gotten on the field, and when he hasn't really done much. So I kind of look at this position group right now. Prior to the draft, was very top heavy, and obviously lost a little bit of depth with Darby going to Jacksonville. So I love the double dip here. I think from a from a room perspective, I think it was probably the right call. Having more safety depth, I think would have also been good, but right now we really kind of have a blessing right now with Marcus and Kyle are just really, really, really good. And reading Hicks's profile too, of like, and cover the slot, like, we got Hamilton for that. We got all pro Hamilton. Like, we're good. I know that like he's kind of a weird one because we wanted to play safety and slot corner and like be both of them at the same time, and we could use another guy to be able to like move him around. But we do have kind of that player right now. We really need the like Geno Stone 2.0. I don't know if Tampa is going to be that guy. I think at least he'll be a good corner. So I like it from that perspective. I feel like between him and Wiggins, I feel like that's we've had good experiences, I think, with the double dip before, and I have no reason, I think, to really doubt the Ravens in that. That was a bad call. We'll talk more about it later, but there are some intriguing safety guys, I think, that'll might be interesting, kind of coming later down.
Cool. Well, in the 5th round, I feel like this is the last real pick, by the way. I'm curious your thoughts. I feel like this is where they were like, all right, we done what we wanted to do. And then they just started kind of filling little needs and, I don't know, some vanity picks. It was kind of weird after this. This felt like the last like real, all right, like we intended to get this guy pick. Well, I guess the next one too. But anyways, Rasheen Ali, running back out of Marshall, 5'11", 206, 23 years old. A guy, when I watched his first like cut up, I was not terribly impressed by, but then as I watched a little bit more, I realized I think he's just a true professional. And what I mean by that is he has really good instincts in all parts of the game, and parts of the game that are usually underdeveloped at this stage, like pass protection and also just savviness coming out of the backfield and pass catching. I think I was turned off by his more vertical running style. I felt like he was a little too upright, but he also showed like good high knees, good evasion, making his own blocks. He could be a little bit more patient as a runner, but doesn't make any like superfluous steps. It's very he tries to go forward. He doesn't do the jitterbug. And I can like this guy. I can see how he fit as a rotational back. I don't necessarily see him ever being a bell cow, but that's not something you're really looking for in the 5th round. I could see him being a contributor and kind of like the next Justice Hill. As Justice Hill kind of gets a little bit older, maybe ages out, finishes his contract, things of that nature, he could be that sort of player.
Yeah, I think he's intriguing. I think he's a guy that's going to really help at the beginning of the season, mix in there with Derrick Henry and Justice Hill. I think that as you're waiting for Keaton to come back, you don't want to overtax Henry. I'd imagine, obviously, with him being up there in age for a running back, you want to keep him fresh for the second half of the season and really use him as a punisher when it starts getting cold and, teams are going to be more reluctant to tackle. I think that's really when the Ravens are going to get a lot out of Derrick Henry. I think what you're saying is true. This guy, you look at his tape, it's very fundamental. He's no nonsense. He's not trying to make a highlight play. He's just trying to go forward and get yards. You look at how many touchdowns he scored in his college career. Most of them were in his sophomore and senior year, as he only played 3 games in his junior season. But just a huge amount of touchdowns. Granted, it was at Marshall, but still, I think you like to see the production. You want to see them overproduce at that level when they're going to the NFL. 42 total touchdowns in his college career. But Yeah, I mean, I agree. I think the Justice Hill comparison is pretty good, and that's Justice Hill was either a 5th or 6th round pick. I can't remember which. I don't think he's ever going to be a bell cow, but certainly in some ways, even though he's not a bigger back like Gus Edwards was, he does kind of remind me of Gus Edwards. Just very north south running style. Plow forward, just get the yards. That type of guy. And it certainly seems to me like there's a place for him. Another guy who I'm really intrigued to see in preseason, because I think that he's going to make some highlight plays there and really show what he can do once we get to that stage in the football year.
Yeah, again, I think the only thing I'll have to add, running back, I felt was another position group that we definitely needed some bodies. With not re-signing Gus or Dobbins, both going to Ravens West, we needed some new names. And I for what it's worth, I kind of like this tape too. I felt like, I felt like the line play, Marshall wasn't really doing him a whole lot of favors. I think there were some, cut ups I saw of like, yeah, like, okay, he didn't get a bunch of yards, but I think there were some things that he did good, that, he just wasn't really being helped out by. Do I think he's the most explosive running back or the fastest running back? No, I think he's got, he has the physical tools to play in the NFL. I don't think he's going to be like the top tier athlete, but I think there was just a lot of stuff that I liked. I feel like he was just like a runner. He could like get things done, and I feel like the Ravens kind of saw that too. So I like it. For context too, kind of looking at the 5th round, just looking at a couple other running backs that were taken again. I feel like Ali is one of those where, given the type of running back the Ravens were trying to target, I feel like it was probably a good call. A couple of the running backs around, I think, the Giants took one pick later, and then the Jags took one, the pick after that. They were a little bit smaller guys. The ones that Jag took, Keelan Robinson was really a kick returner. It could be something the Ravens could use, but also, I mean, we have Keaton Mitchell, right? I know that he's, injured right now. But the Ravens are definitely going to think that he comes back, he's going to be a piece that they're going to want to rely on. And I don't really think that given the roster right now that we needed another Keaton Mitchell. Like, we know who we have. We really just need him to come back healthy. And I feel like the Ravens are confident that that's going to happen, and so they wanted to get another guy who kind of complemented that group.
You want to take us into the next guy?
Yeah, Devin Leary, QB out of Kentucky. Like I said, this one was interesting. Obviously, not one of the top quarterbacks, taking the 6th round, but, he was in, some people's board anywhere from, I don't know, like 10 to, 15 or something like that. As far as physical traits, I do not think he's a Lamar. He's a guy who's definitely has the arm strength, doesn't have the same athleticism, does not have the same escapability in the pocket or, ability to run outside the pocket. I don't think that's his game. I don't think that he's necessarily a statue like Flacco was. He's not that tall, but it's definitely. I feel like I'm leaning towards some guy like maybe like a Colt McCoy or something. He wasn't like an overly physical specimen either, but relatively productive pocket passer. And apparently T. Martin scouted him as well. He was on one of his list of quarterbacks where he's like, yeah, we gotta target him and hopefully develop him and have a chance to compete for the backup spot.
I think it was even more of an interesting pick in the fact that, like you're just saying, Colt McCoy guy, not guy who is terribly mobile. I mean, you look at past backups that the Ravens have tried to develop, they're all mobile, like Lamar, whether it be Trace McSorley or Tyler Huntley, they're, and this guy's not. He's got arm strength, but his accuracy wasn't terribly great, particularly outside the numbers in his college career. So, there's certainly traits that you look at and they're interesting. It's not clear to me exactly what the plan is for this guy. It doesn't even sound like he's going to be the primary backup this year. So, It's one that I'll admit I don't see it right now, which isn't anything to say against the guy, but it just doesn't seem like a fit for the Ravens with what they've been doing as of late. Nor was it an immediate need. So, interesting one, and we'll see what happens with it.
Yeah, I mean, I definitely think that trying to find the athletic, diet version of Lamar is a tricky task that is unlikely to play out well. For you to get on Value Street, or they're not getting drafted highly enough because they're good enough. Like, I don't know. I'm okay with going in a different direction than Lamar as your backup. But with that same token, I'm not so sure Devin Leary is necessarily it. When I thought about it more, I think there's a couple things going on here. First of all, T. Martin thinks that he can, work with him. Okay. Like, he was selected by T as a top interest to get it as a backup, and they got him for him. I think the other thing that you'll look at is, like you said, Peter, he's not going to be the primary backup. So what is he truly adding to the team? If they're going to carry a third quarterback, maybe he can develop into that primary backup. That's obviously the number one hope. But it wouldn't surprise me if they're more so looking for somebody they think would gel well with Lamar, be able to provide him feedback on the sideline that he respected. And if they're looking for just somebody who's like cerebral, can see the plays, hey, be like, I've been seeing this with the defense, maybe you can try this. And they think like Lamar would, respond well to that. And like, once they're just basically finding a guy that like Lamar will like, and like also has the ability to, see the game well. I think that could be almost more valuable because he might not see the field at all. So what else can he contribute, right? It might be what's in the quarterback room. So who knows? Felt a little rich to use a 6th-round pick on it, frankly, but I also don't absolutely hate it because, whatever. For lack of better words, you know what I mean? Like, yeah. It is what it is. Like, it's a 6th round. It's hard to find guys. That's why I kind of was saying at this point, I think they were just like, okay, we would like to get another quarterback. T, who do you like? All right, we'll draft him. Next up, we want to get one of these. Who do we like? All right, we'll take him too. This is very off board. I think at this point, this is no longer their big board, so to speak. It's like a side section where they're like, okay, we want to get these fits. It's basically priority UDFAs. Skip the courting process after the draft and giving them an extra $10,000, whatever it is, and the sign-on bonus and things of that nature. They're just trying to plug holes. So I think that's what happened here. And whatever, cool enough. We'll see. I'll say the big thing you were saying, Peter, struggle outside the numbers. I think one of the big reasons is that he's really bad at understanding trailing coverage. So if he can improve that, he might get a lot more completions because he didn't see how the coverage and the leverage was working out, threw the ball and got deflected or picked, It's okay, throwing outside the numbers is a struggle for you because you're just you think the guy's open and he's not. And it's going to be even worse in the NFL, right? So he really needs to get better at that because that's the one thing you might get away with in the college game, but you won't in the NFL. So we'll see. We'll develop him. We'll watch him in preseason in the 4th quarter. All right. Next up, Nick Samac, center out of Michigan State. 6'4", 307, 22 years old, 3-year starter. Moves well in the run game. Pass pro can use some work. What I saw in the one cut up is that he's a little impatient and can get lungy, but he has really good hands fighting. And, like they always say, he could be a guard too. So all right, add him to the guard competition, center guard versatility. I don't know if I totally buy it, but whatever. Here we are, just another one of those guys. He'll compete for the back of the lineup, give Salah some pressure, I guess. And we do need a backup center if they're not going to use McCary. If they want to use McCary as more of a backup tackle or a backup guard, you know what I mean? If they still feel they need a backup center, then he's probably going to get a roster spot. But obviously we'll have to compete and earn it.
Yeah, I mean, not much more to say beyond that. I will say, in doing some research on him, I found some clips on YouTube where, he was interviewed for Michigan State, some type of local broadcast or school funded show. So he would do some press interviews, and for a guy in college, I mean, he sounded very professional, very much like a leader on the team. I could certainly see that being something else that the team liked that probably went well over with them, a guy who can come in there and be professional. Particularly, he's a guy who's going to be drafted low. So, yeah, I mean, he adds depth to the interior lineman room, and we'll see beyond that.
Yeah, I feel like I have nothing to add, but looking forward to kind of seeing him in the preseason. Just kind of want to see him under live action and see how he does. Guess we'll go into the last one. Last pick, pick 250, Sanoussi Kane, safety out of Purdue.
I guess we'll talk about two guys at once with this. It's kind of inevitable, right?
I agree, Peter. I think, Chris, why don't you give us your thoughts on this pick, and then Peter, you can kind of lead into that part too.
Sure. Yeah. Sanoussi Kane. I feel like he's an interesting guy. A little bit of a tweener, I think, from what I've seen. Does play safety, but can play, dime back, and can also play a little bit of linebacker. I think DeCosta said he could be like a Nakamura like player. Not sure if I totally see that, but I feel like picking a safety at some point was definitely a good idea. Having some versatility, I think, is also something that the Ravens do value. So I can kind of see it from that perspective. It's a little hard, I think, trying to envision it, just knowing that, our last 7th round safety, Geno Stone, was really freaking good at the end of his contract. Kane, it's really hard to kind of see him in that same vein right now, just given the pick. But obviously, two different types of players. Geno's a, cover too high, safety. Obviously got paid by the Bengals because they know that he can play it. Kane is, I think, it's just a different player.
Yeah. So I think we look at this pick, and then you also look at that they were able to grab Brade out of Maryland as an UDFA. A little more versatile, I would say, than Kane. Obviously, a lot of people locally were excited for this pickup. Just played college football down at College Park. And you look at the tape with him, very hard hitting. He has range back there. He shows in this tape he can blitz, he can do the run, he can go back in coverage. Certainly seems more versatile than Kane from what I've seen out of Kane, of his tape. I think a lot of the tape I've seen has mainly been stuff around the line of scrimmage, stuffing runs and rushing the quarterback. Nothing really in coverage. But yeah, it is very interesting that they brought both these guys in, and particularly that they drafted Kane over Brade. That in and of itself, I think, is there some local bias to the collective Ravens view between these two guys? It's certainly possible. I mean, of course, I think a hometown guy who played college football in the state is going to get the obviously be looked at as the kind of the higher guy when you're talking about a 7th round pick versus a UDFA. But it'll be really interesting to see these two guys in preseason, because it really feels like with Geno Stone gone, and you're not going to move Tampa to safety, which we said we're still think is a possibility, but we really have no evidence that suggests that the Ravens are going to do that. It's very possible one of these two guys is getting the backup safety work when the season starts. So it's going to be interesting, and that's going to be a camp battle of two rookies right there. And it would be kind of surprising if both made the roster, honestly, just both of them being low draft pick / undrafted. But that's going to be an interesting camp battle.
For sure. I think right now I see them both making the roster. However, I do anticipate a free agency move being made, and then I will no longer see both of them making the roster. It'll be a competition. So I do think, today was the day that they can now make signs, acquisitions that don't impact the compensatory pick formula. I thought potentially we would have a bunch of things going on. Maybe Gallup would finally get signed, but he actually went to the Raiders. So we'll see what they end up doing. There's still a couple safeties out there. They might do the treatment where get these guys in the camp, have no competition for them, let them get the most snaps possible, and then bring in a guy that's a veteran. But that's where we're at right now. I also feel similar, where I feel like Brade was the better choice, but Who knows? Kane wasn't even a guy that went to the combine, so he was really, kind of off people's boards. Just didn't get much buzz. So maybe they found somebody. Maybe what they see with Kane is a very specific role player / special teamer, where they're like, we think if he does this one thing, he does it really well, and he'll do well in that. And it makes me wonder, with that pick, with the Tampa pick, with just in general the approach when it came to safety, the pick, even of Wiggins. Where is this defense evolving? It could be changing more than we anticipate, So keeping an eye on that. I guess we'll see come week 1 because we won't find out in the preseason. But, we'll see. I'm kind of curious to see what this iteration of the defense looks like. But when you got Roquan Smith there and Hamilton and Matabike and a bunch of other star players and very good players, I believe this defense will still be excellent. And it just might look a little different. That's okay. So let's see. Let's see if there's any other UDFAs worth calling out. They got like a 25-year-old Mormon coming in as tight end, Riley Sharp, converted linebacker, a long snapper. Cool. They got this behemoth, Darrell Simpson, 6'8", 348 pounds out of Tulsa. They got the Morgan State kid, Jordan Tolles, safety, kind of ball hawky, but, level of competition. Another running back guy who's super productive, but in low competition from Lock Haven called Chris Collier. Another linebacker. A whole bunch of wide receivers. There's Isaiah Washington out of Rutgers, 6'3", 210, had an impressive pro day. They had D'Angelo Hardy out of North Carolina Central, 6'2", 197. The classic, we will bring in every tall guy that can jump ball, and we will see if any of them can turn into anything more. A bunch of those kind of guys. There's one that I would say keep an eye on. I don't know how he makes a team given the log jam, but could be a guy on the practice squad and keep an eye on, I would say, is John McCartan out of Oregon State. Kind of a Sam prospect, 8.5 sacks last year. I could see him maybe lingering around, particularly if Moon is lost. So, defensive end, Joe Evans out of Iowa, 9.5 sacks last year. I don't know. I'll keep an eye out on him, see if any of them pop during preseason. But a couple guys that could have some potential.
Skipped over another Maryland guy, Darian Dalcourt.
Yeah, I meant to say that.
Shout out, Havity Grace. Yeah, apparently went to St. Francis too. So, but then Alabama, obviously. So he has all the connections for the Ravens.
yeah, he has the triple crown.
There it
is. There's actually another guard too. Corey Bullock out of Maryland. He was an honorable Big Ten selection, highest pass blocking grade in the conference per PFF. He's a guard as well out of Maryland. So, there are players. So maybe they can develop them on the practice squad. But I think Brade is the number one likely to make the team and not just practice squad.
Now, do we feel more or less confident about him than we did with Keaton Mitchell last year? Because Keaton was the one that everyone was excited about last year. And obviously we were right. We were all collectively right. Do we feel that confident about Brade?
I haven't watched Brade's tape, and I should, but I feel like Keaton was also extra special because he had his dad play. So we were like, okay, well, he's a good player, and he's got the pedigree, and he's been around, and same thing with Orlando Brown.
I would say I'm less confident, but that it's kind of close. I think the big thing with Keaton is it was he had a crazy trait that you could point at, the speed. Brade just looks like he absolutely wants to take people's heads off, which is great. You love that out of his safety. That's kind of what I saw when I watched him. I think he needs to be a little bit more disciplined, a little less head on fire. But honestly, that was what I was saying about Hicks. The guy I adored and brought up 4 times in this episode, and he went to the Chiefs. Hicks just played like his hair was on fire. He was all over the field. Great anticipation. Brade kind of reminds me of that too. So I'm excited for the player. I do think it's likely he'll make the team. But we'll see. He has to prove it first. But I don't know. I feel like the Ravens are obsessed with like holding on to running backs. Like they were like, we're going to draft a running back this year, and they did, and they were like big into like drafting young running backs and kind of continuing to do that. Safety, I feel like they're not as committed to. Like they kind of like mess around with Stone, they messed around with Lucien, like on and off the team. Like they just haven't been as willing to like say yes to a guy who like shows promise. That makes me a little bit more concerned. Also, Big O's win. Let's go.
Let's go. Danny Coulomb, new closer.
Mr. Blue Glove.
At least for today.
But yeah, I mean, I'm excited, guys. I think like this is a nice crop of players. I'm excited to watch them grow and become Ravens. Cool to see like what numbers they pick. I think Wiggins is going to be number 2. It seems like give me his college number. So yeah, I mean it's fun. I mean football is back. They're going to be practicing soon, and then we'll be in the wall. That is the summer a little bit, but yeah, I mean we'll be back eventually. I would say heavy on the eventually. Like, we'll do it. It just we're kind of taking a model of we're gonna make shows when there's really something to talk about, and maybe not do as much evergreen content this off season. So keep tuned and let us know what you think about these draft picks. You can find us still on Twitter, Threads, X @OneWinningPod. You can email us onewinningpod@gmail.com and just reach out to us. And go Ravens, go Orioles, and we'll talk to you soon.